All right, let me get my pen started because you know the drill. Everybody always says that when they start making a video, and there's a reason. They got to get their pen started. All right, so bone development. Again, you've got this as a video, Dr. Ansardi's video, and you've got me doing it, so hopefully between the two of us, you will understand these concepts. A little bit of review as we start. Bone is composed of a matrix. Okay? Well, see, I told you, this integrity pen's a little bit different than the other one. There we go. Bone is composed of a matrix. Basically, you have an osteoid substance, which has collagen fibers for strength, and that hydroxyapatite are those calcium salts that make it hard. Okay, so it's basically two things. You have osteoid that's made by the osteoblast, which has collagen fibers, and hydroxyapatite, which makes it hard. Bone also has those living cells. You have the osteogenic or stem cells, the osteoblasts, which are the building cells, the osteocytes, which are just mature osteoblasts, and osteoclasts that break down the bone breakdown cells. And we'll talk about what each one of those cells types do. Okay, a little bit of review again. We're going to kind of go back over and review. When you talk about a bone, bone has two types of bone. Every bone has some spongy bone and some compact bone. Some is more compact, some is more spongy, but all bones have both types. This spongy bone is the one that looks like a honeycomb. It's also called trabecular bone because it's made out of those little T-shapes. Then you have compact bone, which are made out of those little osteons. It's also called lamellar bone because each one of those layers is a lamella. And all bone has a really good vasculature or blood supply going through it. And every bone is usually got some kind of cartilage, which is a type of hyaline cartilage, around the end so that the bones can articulate and rub against each other. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go back and just review, make sure you guys are getting these concepts. This is basically a long bone, okay? You got a little bit of spongy bone, and then you've got it surrounded by this compact bone. Each one of these sets of concentric rings is an osteon, okay? Each ring of the concentric ring is a lamella, so each ring is the lamella. Each osteon has a central canal, which is this little area right here. And inside each central canal, you have a blood vessel, an artery, a vein, and you have blood vessels, an artery, a vein, and a nerve. And in order for you to communicate between osteons, you have these perforating or Volkmann canals, and they're basically perpendicular. They allow the osteon blood to go between osteons. You also have lacuna and canaliculi. Let's go to the next slide. Lacuna, which are the little cell homes for the osteocytes, and you have the canaliculus or canaliculi, which are basically little canals that connect one osteocyte to another through the lamella so that you can get nutrients out to the bone and waste products back to the veins. And we actually have a model of this in lab. I'm going to do that next week, not this week. I'm going to kind of let you guys get broken in on the bones this week. But we will do the osteon model and some slides in lab next week. All right. Like I said, a lot of this is going to be reviewed just to really hit home those topics. The microscopic anatomy of the spongy bone. You've got those trabeculae. Remember, they align along lines of stress. Okay? So even though it looks like they're kind of random, if you really look at them microscopically, you'll see that they do kind of line up where there's a lot of stress on a bone. And a great example is the femur. And you would think, like, if this is the body up here, okay, there's a lot of weight pressing down on this little part of the bone. You would think it would be better off if the femur just kind of basically came straight down. It'd be a better weight-bearing bone. So to compensate for the fact that the femur kind of comes out to the side, this area here is really, really reinforced with these trabeculae because this is where the stress line of that bone is. They have irregularly arranged lamella, they have osteocytes, and canaliculi. And all these little areas here, these little spaces, that's where the little osteocytes will be living, and the blood vessels just kind of wrap themselves in and around those spaces. All right, bone development. There's 3 stages of bone development. You have to form the bone has to grow, and then you have to remodel it. Bone formation is also called osteogenesis. Genesis means beginning, or ossification. You may say either one of those words with bone formation. And this begins in the 2nd month of development, not after you're born. I'm talking about in utero. So 2nd month in utero, you start to see the bones formed. Your bones grow until early adulthood, so through puberty. In females, bone growth ceases somewhere between 15 and 18. And in males, somewhere between 18 and 21, you're fully grown. So there's no more bone growth after that. Now, you do have bone remodeling and repair. That happens all your life. You can obviously think about a repair. What if here's your arm. If you snap your arm, obviously it's going to heal back, right? You can set it and the bone will grow back. So we know about repair. We also have remodeling, where actually some of our bones will start to change shape. And an obvious one of that would be, think about an older lady, okay, and she gets kind of that humpback, her spine starts to curve. Those vertebrae actually start to change shape a little bit. They get remodeled. And we associate that sometimes with arthritis, things like that. So we get some bone remodeling as we age. The bones actually change shape. Okay, this is kind of a cool picture. Have our bone formation, or our osteogenesis, or ossification. And the thing that you want to remember, star, underline, bold print, the connective tissue always forms first. Basically, you lay down cartilage, and then that becomes bone. It's calcified or ossified to become bone. So you're going to lay down the cartilage first, and then it's going to become ossified, which basically means the calcium is being put in and it's getting hard. So you can actually see, this is an x-ray of an infant, and what you're seeing actually is not bone, it's actually cartilage. So basically this baby, all their bones are actually just pieces of cartilage, and it's going to have to harden and become bone. So you're seeing basically this little cartilaginous shields that make up the skull, the hips, ribs, arms. Interestingly, just to kind of throw this out there, have you ever heard of like a bony fish? And then there's the, now I'm blanking. What do you call a shark? Shark's bones are basically made out of cartilage. They don't harden with calcium like a bony fish. So you have some fish that have actual calcium in their bones, and then some fish that are more cartilaginous fish. That's what they're called, cartilaginous fish. They don't really harden up. So you can imagine when you start as a child, you basically start as a cartilaginous fish. You're just made out of cartilage, and your bones don't really harden like they would. That's what happens with fish. They actually have 2 types of skeletons. Anyway, that's just an aside. We're going to, well, no, but let me show you how that works. We're getting there. So it becomes vascularized as the bone develops. So we'll get there. So there's 2 ways to ossify tissue: intramembranous and endochondral. Intramembranous formation of bone, that's basically flat bones. So you can see this is where you have intramembranous bones forming, wherever you have flat bones, like in your skull, your sternum. Endochondral bones are pretty much any other type of bone. And we're going to talk about how each one of these progress. You start to see this again at 2 months or 8 weeks of gestation. The first thing that happens, you have the connective tissue laid down. So you have this connective tissue. Then these bone-forming cells are going to migrate to that area. Okay? Those bone-forming cells secrete the osteoid, which is that collagen fibers and then the hydroxyapatite. That osteoid becomes calcified, and then you have to remodel or reshape the bone. So let's talk about how that works. All right, 2 types. Intramembranous. This means bone forms from a membrane. Okay? This is your flat bones, like your clavicles, your sternum, your cranial bones. You start with a membrane. Endochondral, remember chondro means cartilage. This means that the bone forms by replacing hyaline cartilage. So you put hyaline cartilage down first, then you get bone. But the first thing you have to do is break down that cartilage before you can ossify it. So you break down the cartilage, then the bone-forming cells bring in the osteoid, and you get ossification. And that's how you make most of the skeleton.
How do you break down the cartilage?
We're getting there. Here we go. We got pictures of all this. All right. Like I said, hopefully between me and then watching Dr. Ansardi's 2.2 A and B, this will become clear as mud, because I know it's kind of a complicated process. So intramembranous ossification. And I came up with this little phrase here that helps me remember. Intramembranous ossification is bone growth from the inside out using a membrane. So from the inside out using a membrane. So what you do, step number one, is you have a membrane, a fibrous membrane, okay? And then you've got osteoblasts that come in, and they basically migrate to inside the membrane, and they start to make that osteoid. Okay, so here's our membrane, here's our osteoblasts, okay? And now they're secreting all that osteoid, and it becomes hard. That osteoid calcifies, and these cells are now trapped. So we got those little lacuna that we talked about earlier, they're trapped. All right? And these cells then mature, these osteoblasts then become osteocytes, and they're now trapped in those little lacuna. All right, now what happens is, as this new bone matrix is produced, blood vessels basically start to come in and infuse randomly into that system, into these little cavities. And that's how you get spongy bone. After the spongy bone has formed, you have osteoblasts that come in and they line up toward the outside of the spongy bone and they build compact bone. So you've started with a membrane, you've put cells inside the membrane, okay, and the bone is being built outward. And the last step is to build compact bone around the edges. So think about how you would make a flat bone like in the skull. You start off by making this part, then you finish it off making the compact bone around it. That's intramembranous. Endochondral, you're basically starting from inside a piece of cartilage. So this is bone growth from the outside in using cartilage templates. So the other one was starting from the inside with a membrane. This is starting outside using cartilage. So let's go step number one. This blue stuff, remember blue has always been hyaline cartilage throughout our book, right? So this is basically hyaline cartilage. You've laid down the cartilage, you've made the bone. Think about that baby's picture with the red bones. That was just cartilage. You're seeing the cartilage. A bony collar, this is bone, starts to develop in the periosteum. Remember the periosteum is that membrane around the bone. So you're starting on the outside. The cartilage in the very middle of the diaphysis, remember that's the shaft, starts to calcify, and then it deteriorates. It just starts to break down. All right? Once you have that opening or that cavity, blood vessels will then go in, infiltrate. You'll have cells come in, and you're going to form spongy bone. Okay? The bone building, the osteoblasts are going to come in, and you're going to build spongy bone. Now, after you've got this medullary cavity made, basically have all this spongy bone in here. The osteoclasts are going to come in, and they're basically going to break it down. It's like you're building and breaking, building and breaking. Osteoclasts come in, and they degrade that spongy bone. And when that happens, you get that medullary cavity. You have a place where the red marrow or the yellow marrow, as you become an adult, has a place to go. So you started with cartilage. You basically built some bone. You broke it down and made a hole. So now you have a place for your bone marrow. Finally, compact bone. So you've built all this spongy bone. Compact bone comes in and develops around the edges. So you have compact bone coming in and being laid down all around the outside. Okay, so once you've laid down the bone, okay, it can then grow either long, which is called interstitial growth, which means you're making the bones longer, or appositional growth, which means you can make the bones wider or change their shape. And you use, when you're remodeling the bone, you use both osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Remember, the osteoblasts build the bone, the osteoclasts break down the bone. So once you're born, your bones are going to have length growth, and this is going to happen through puberty and adolescence. So in girls, like I said, somewhere between 15 and 18, this interstitial growth will stop, and somewhere between 18 and 21 for boys, it will stop. But you're going to have some appositional growth, some width and remodeling. That can happen all your life.
Is there any catalyst that would help the bone to grow longer or grow more?
Growth hormone, which is my next talk. You were just staying, just one step ahead of me. So when we come back on Monday, we're going to talk about pituitary dwarfism, pituitary gigantism, which basically has to do with growth hormone. We're going to talk about vitamin D deficiencies. We're going to talk about rickets. We're going to talk about basically all the diseases that are associated with bone growth. So hold that thought. We're going to get there. Okay. Now, if you look at a long bone, you've got this little area right here. I told you guys that's the epiphyseal plate, which is also, we know it commonly as the growth plate. So since it's called the growth plate, that's where the bone grows. That's where it gets longer. That's where the actual growth occurs. All right, so basically what we've taken a bone and we've blown up the epiphyseal plate or the growth plate. And basically what the epiphyseal plate is, it's a zone of chondrocytes. What do chondrocytes make? Cartilage. And we said that you have to do what before you make bone? Make cartilage. Okay, so you have this chondrocytes, a zone of chondrocytes between the epiphysis and the diaphysis. Remember, this is the epiphysis up here. This is the diaphysis. All right. These chondrocytes remain active. They live and they do their thing until the epiphyseal plates close. That's when you have reached your full adult height. Usually, like I said, between 15 and 18 in females, between 18 and 21 in males. That corresponds with puberty. And let me go ahead and throw this out there. We'll talk about it next week. You're going, well, how come females only grow to their 18 and males grow to their 21? What happened at puberty? What might account for that? Hormones. Is there anything different about the hormones in females and males?
Yeah, they're a lot crazier.
Now females make estrogen and males make testosterone. All right. Estrogen basically shuts down chondrocytes. Okay. Testosterone activates or increases chondrocyte activity. So once you reach puberty, start having your period as a female, start making estrogen, you're basically killing off your chondrocytes. So once you're, usually within a year, usually girls start somewhere between 12 and, well, now 11. Girls are starting earlier and earlier. Between 11 and 13, most girls should start their period. Somewhere between 18 to 24 months post that period, they're going to start to reach their maximum height. So somewhere between, because our periods are becoming earlier, a lot of girls are reaching their maximum height a little bit younger than they were in the past. So that estrogen starts to basically kill off your chondrocytes, slow them down, and you reach your maximum height. So males, once they reach puberty, which is actually a little bit later, males start doing their puberty more, 12 to 15. Okay, once they hit puberty and start making more testosterone, that activates or kind of speeds up their chondrocytes, and they get, a big, nice growth spurt. What you'll see, it is possible maybe to change a hormonal change in females to make them grow, but, we really don't want to mess around with females' estrogen because they got enough going on, Yeah, dealing with their hormones, you know. So, but that's kind of the thing. Estrogen's kind of a negative effect on height, and testosterone has a positive effect on height. So it has it's all to do with your hormones based on how tall you're going to grow, and when you're going to stop growing. And we'll talk about that more next week. All right, so you've got these epiphyseal plates that are going to stay open. You're going to have growth until you basically reach maturity. And what you're going to see is that basically bone is chasing the cartilage. You're going to lay the cartilage down, and then the bone is going to chase it. All right, so what we're doing, we're making this bone grow in this direction. Okay, so this bone is, we're basically looking at this section here. We're watching this bone grow this way. So the first step is you lay down these mitotic chondrocytes. Okay, now these are actually up here. These are the mitotic chondrocytes. What's mitosis mean? Dividing, growing. Okay, they were down here. Okay, because what happens next is those start to die. So these are your dying chondrocytes. And then you start to break down that cartilage. This is where it's starting to get broken down. And then you replace that cartilage with that bone matrix, that osteoid, and it starts to get hard. So you just keep putting new cartilage here, keep building new cartilage here, then this dies, and then this dies, then this starts to break down, this starts to get hard. You see how that progresses? And the bone becomes longer. So that's basically what's happening at the epiphyseal plate. So if you have that zone of mitotically active cells and you have a break at the epiphyseal plate, and you break this and damage where that cartilage is, that makes the bone, it stops the growth. That's why a break in an adolescent at a growth plate is such a big deal. They have to really heal that quickly, bind it, and hope for the best. Because if you break that growth plate, that may be the end of the bone growth for that particular bone. And this is just kind of a cool X-ray. You can actually see epiphyseal plates. So this is the femur and the fibula and tibia. So these little lines here are the growth plates. You can see this is the radius and the ulna, and you can see the little growth plates. So these bones, these are taken in an adolescent, they're still growing. Now, once they are mature, you might see a really faint line, but it will pretty much be solid once they reach adulthood. You won't see that little gap anymore. So you can see if this bone broke, that's just cartilage there holding that bone together. That's an easy place for that bone to break. I mean, you could easily break a growth plate. That's why they're easily damaged and hard to repair. If you were thinking about being, let's just go NCIS or SVU, one of those crazy TV shows where they're trying to find out how somebody died, and you found some bones. I have an eraser. Yeah. If you found some bones laying on the ground, okay, and you were like, okay, this is a femur, all right, and it's been there a while. There's no guts and stuff anymore. It's just blood. I mean, it's just bones, all right? And you found this part of a bone, and laying right next to it was this little bitty nubbin of a bone. What would that have told you? They were young. They were still adolescents. Their bones hadn't quit, because that cartilage would have what? Rotted away. It would be gone, and those bones would be called disarticulated. They would have come apart. Okay? Now, if you found that same bone and you could basically see the whole outline of the femur, that would tell you what? They were older. So just by looking at those epiphyseal, that's one thing they look for. They can age a person based on whether or not you've still got those growth plates open. So, when you're watching TV, some of what they say is actually true. Some of it's not so much. Sometimes I watch those shows and go, really?
They could just look and pick that hair out of nothing. Oh, I see a hair.
Yeah, but you actually can't age someone based on, looking at those epiphyseal plates. All right, so a little bit of hormone regulation. We'll talk about that a little bit. Maybe I am going to do that today. I think I'll talk about it again next week, though. All right, hormonal regulation. Growth hormone stimulates those epiphyseal plates, okay? So we all have growth hormone, and that's one thing, like I said, we'll talk about it next week. Not enough growth hormone makes you a dwarf or low in stature. Too much growth hormone can make you what's called gigantism, or, you're overgrown. Like I said, we'll more detail on that next week. Thyroid hormone, also, it modulates growth hormone. So if you have a thyroid problem as an adolescent, it may be changing how much growth hormone you're producing. So, if you're too short or too tall, it may not have actually been the growth hormone that was messed up. It could have been the thyroid hormone that was causing the effect. Yeah.
We know that there's dangers associated with taking steroids. Is there dangers associated with taking human growth hormone?
It's not, I don't want to say this. Yeah, it's not really. I mean, you just don't give people growth hormone to make somebody tall. I mean, they have to have a reason. I mean, when you go to the doctor, there's a reason that they plot your growth. Okay, they measure your child every time they come in between birth through about age 15, and they're watching that growth curve. And there's an average. Okay, if your child starts to really peak out and be abnormally tall or abnormally short, they may look into checking for amounts of growth hormone. Because if you have, and I'll go ahead and start talking about, I'm going to talk about next week. If you have too much growth hormone, it's probably a tumor. Okay, there's probably a pituitary tumor making too much growth hormone. Well, you got to deal with that. That's surgical. All right, so.
Like if they were taking it, like parts of their body would be growing where others.
In adolescence, the whole body should be growing. Well, like I said, we're going to get into this a whole lot more next week. But if they're too short, they may not be making enough growth hormone. Okay, so growth hormone supplementation would be called for, and it's perfectly safe to take growth hormone as a child and through adolescence to catch them up. Now, once you have reached adulthood, post-adolescence, if you take growth hormone, all growth hormone does not make you taller. Okay, that is not going to happen. Your epiphyseal plates are closed. What it will do, remember I just talked about interstitial growth, which goes this way, and appositional growth, which goes that way. It will affect this appositional growth, and I've got some pictures that I'll show you next week. And it only really affects the hands and the jaws. And you'll see these big blocky jaws and big gargantuan hands, and it's called acromegaly. And so you really can't take growth hormone as an adult safely. Yeah, it's not an approved thing for adults. So. And well, it's probably not the safest thing to do because it usually leads to heart failure.
Well, what I want to do, I've got 2 boys, and I want to make sure that they get about 6'8". That's what I do that.
Put them on a rack, okay, and stretch them. That's the best way. Just hang them by their feet every night. All right. So again, we're going to, testosterone and estrogen. At first, estrogen will promote a growth spurt, but then, like I said, it then has a negative effect on growth, and then testosterone will have a positive effect on growth. And we'll talk about that more next week as well. Okay, that appositional growth. That longitudinal or that long growth and that wide growth. Okay? So basically, in long growth, you have that bone, that cartilage being laid down, and then the bone following the cartilage, and the bone gets longer. If you break a bone, or even as you're growing and your body's changing, sometimes the shape of the bone has to be modified. And so what happens is you have bone that's resorbed. So this is the original shape of the bone over here. Okay. Basically, you've gone in and broken down some bone, gotten rid of it, and then laid down new bone. So you can actually reshape a bone, and I've got some pictures of that we'll show you next week too. But basically, you have cells that go in, break down the bone, reshape it, and then lay down more bone, make it wider, or like I said, with arthritis, sometimes you'll have bone spurs. You ever heard of a bone spur? That's basically remodeling of the bone. Somewhere that maybe you've had some trauma, and you've got maybe a tendon or a ligament that's rubbing over a bone, and in order to protect itself, it'll basically remodel and make a little bone spur. So you get.
Is there a reason to get rid of those if you have them?
Well, you might if maybe it's growing and there actually was a nerve in the general area, and now it's rubbing on that nerve, and so, or think about your shoulder. It's like a ball and socket joint. If the bone spur grows here, now you don't have that smooth rotation anymore. So yeah, a lot of times they'll remove them. I had one on my shoulder. Okay, bone deposit. When would you want to put down bone? So remember we said bone was basically a bank, so we're making a bone deposit. Okay, you're going to do that when a bone is injured or if you need more strength. All right, this is the one time, the only time you're going to hear me say it's actually a good thing to be overweight. Okay, this is the only time that happens. Overweight people have denser bone. Okay, they are much less likely to develop osteoporosis. All that weight, all that stress on the bone causes their bones to remodel. Okay, lay down more bone. They actually have very, very dense bone, and so they're harder to break, much less likely to have osteoporosis. So it's the one time that weight does a good thing for your body. It gives you really, really strong bones. In order to put down bone, to have strong bones, you have to have a good diet, and we're going to talk about that next week. We talk about rickets and scurvy. Those are some diseases that have to do with the bones, and it has to do with your nutritional input. You have to have rich in protein. You got to have protein to make those cells. It's osteocytes and osteoblasts, and put down that collagen and all that stuff. You got to have vitamins C, D, and A. You have to have a diet rich in calcium, phosphorus, because remember calcium and phosphorus together make hydroxyapatite. That's those salts that are hard in bone. Magnesium and manganese. So these are some things you have to have in your diet in order for your bones to be strong.
What type of food provides those last four?
Yeah, you get this. Your leafy green vegetables are really good at basically all this last group. If you'll eat, colorful vegetables. Manganese and magnesium are usually in fortified cereals. If you'll look, those usually have some manganese and just a little bit in there, a little bit of magnesium. Of course, calcium, anything dairy, you're going to get it from that. All right, bone resorption. Okay, now don't get confused by this word. Bone resorption, that means you're doing what to the bone? Building it or breaking it down? Breaking it down. If you're breaking down the bone, then you're releasing calcium into the blood. So if you need to have more calcium in your blood, you're going to have bone resorption, breaking down the bone, which is by the osteoclasts. And basically what the osteoclasts do is they secrete an enzyme. What's an enzyme? Something that ends with what? ACE, okay, and it usually is something that breaks something down. So enzymes are going to basically break down that organic matrix and allow those calcium salts to be soluble, which means they'll dissolve and go into the blood. So now you have more calcium in your blood. And that will raise your blood calcium levels. And again, what did I say you needed calcium for? For normal what? For what to work normally? Muscles and nerves. All right, some developmental aspects of bone. Your embryonic skeleton ossifies predictably. Okay, so if you took an X-ray of a fetus, this is my little fetus, a bigger fetus and a bigger fetus, you can actually look at how those head bones, those cranial bones, or the long bones of the humerus or the femur, you can see how they're ossifying, and you can actually get the age of the baby just by looking at the sonogram or X-ray of how well their bones are developing. At birth, most of the long bones are ossified except at the epiphysis. Your growth plates are still open, but all your other bones, when you're born, if you're born at normal gestational age, your bones should be ossified. So here's another picture of a baby, and you can age it. I can't age it because I don't know anything about radiology, but apparently they can. But they can age it based on these ossification centers, which are usually toward the middle of a bone. Okay, remember, bone grows out or long ways. So they'll look at the center, and then they'll look at how dense the bone is as it goes out, and they can age the fetus by doing that. That's just a cool picture. Okay, some more developmental aspects of bone. Nearly all your bones are completely ossified by age 25. Okay, so even when you reach your maximum height, your bones may not be completely ossified. The epiphyseal plates have slowed down. They're almost closed. But they will be completely closed, and all your bone will be completely ossified by the age of 25. On the downside, when you reach around 40, your bone mass starts to decrease. The only way you can combat that, and I hope you learn this when you do your osteoporosis case study, diet and exercise will help you maintain bone mass after age 40. The rate of loss is determined by your genetics and your environmental factors. Okay, things like smoking tends to decrease bone mass. If your mother and your grandmother and your great-grandmother all had what we call the dowager's hump, or the hump on the back of their upper shoulders, they all look like that, chances are genetically you're going to start doing that. So you can combat that with diet and exercise. You want to increase your posture, build those back muscles, do whatever you can to combat, becoming hunched over like that. As you get older, bone breakdown occurs more than bone building. So your osteoclasts are more active than your osteoblasts. And there's some random bone facts that I threw in here. All right, every week we recycle about 5 to 7% of our bone mass. So our bone is a living tissue. We tend to think of bone as some kind of stagnant, part of our body, but it is actually doing something all the time. It's constantly taking calcium in, putting calcium out, taking calcium in, putting calcium out, constantly recycling. We actually totally replace our spongy bone about every 3 to 5 years. So you're constantly replacing that bone, so it's always good and healthy. Takes a little bit longer because it's denser. Compact bone is replaced about every 10 years. And bone can last about 1,000 years in a grave. I just think that's cool. So that's going to be the last thing that we find of you. 1,000 years from now, you'll still have your bones here. The rest of you will be gone, but your bones will still be with us. So they're basically our secret keepers. So we can do a lot of cool things with bone. We can carbon date, find out how old a person was when they died, things like that. Look at a skeleton, and we'll talk about this next week. We'll talk about skeletal differences between the sexes. We'll see females have these wide hips, males have these little hips. So we'll talk about all those different changes that you can see on a skeleton, especially once they're dead, when you're trying to figure out if somebody's a male or female. One more, I think. Nope, is that it? Maybe so. All right, let me stop that.